Good Friday morning, guys. My name is Jerry Miller, and welcome to Real Talk. Thank you kindly for joining us. The Friday edition of Real Talk is coffee with the stakeholders, and Neil Williamson certainly embodies that moniker. The president of the Free Enterprise Forum, he will be live in a matter of moments with the star of the show, Keith Smith, a.k.a. the Distinguished Gentleman. Of course, Real Talk is powered by Sigora Solar. Sigora Solar, absolutely a power and solar company you can count on. Sigora Solar, I believe, is the solar behind the Keith Smith and Yonna Smith abode. Is that accurate?
We're signing docs next week.
There you go, Sigora Solar, guys. Thank you for those partners for being a part of the show. Judah Wickhauer is our director. Why don't we go to the studio camera and Keith? I have a feeling you're getting zinged right now.
Well, I'm just going to say thank you to Shenandoah Joe for the coffee today.
Thank you, Dave Fafara.
For being a sponsor, because I think I'm going to need a little extra coffee today for what's about ready to happen.
Neil Williamson, you see on the show right now, and Neil, you got a Yeti cup, you got some delicious Java from Shenandoah Joe's, and a fine bottle of bourbon, my friend.
I am happy to walk in today to the studio and have this lovely bottle to greet me, still sealed, and it will be a treat to enjoy over the holidays, thanks to the Distinguished Gentleman and his erroneous targeting for picks.
Yeah, a prop bet. So Neil Williamson won a prop bet that was executed here on set of Real Talk, and this prop bet was essentially associated with the future land use map. Neil Williamson read the tea leaves correctly. My friend, my dear friend, Keith Smith did not read the tea leaves correctly, and as a result, this bottle of bourbon is Neil Williamson and the Williamson clans to enjoy.
Well, and to be fair, it could have gone a different way.
I was close.
You were only off by a month, but you know, a month is a month is a month, and they really didn't even take it to a second public. It wasn't really that close because they have another meeting, but the flum was approved after, I believe it was 70 speakers at the public hearing.
That's right.
And the future land use map is complicated. Implementation of the zoning ordinance will be even more complicated, but I will say that I am not surprised that this city council wanted to have something as a legacy piece for getting something done.
Bingo. I think that's exactly right. Ray Cadell, welcome to the show. Nicholas Erpy, welcome to the show. Folks at Avenue, welcome to the show. Keith, the legacy piece, that's why I thought the bet was a little bit precarious. You had two counselors exiting, one meeting left for each of them, and one of the two, this is undoubtedly an aspect of her legacy. And of course, I'm talking about the mayor.
So, you know, I'm gladly lost the bet, right? You know, it needed to get done. It got done. I gladly lost it. I
gladly won.
I'm really surprised that Neil didn't work some magic in the back somewhere, so this would go to the 11th hour of the 11th moment, and then at the last second I would go, "Ooh, I lost." But no, look, you know, it's a bet's a bet, man, and you know, I called it wrong. You called it right.
Well, I'm happy that it worked out this way. That way I have spirits for Thanksgiving.
Do we want to do a double or nothing later on?
Oh, what are you going to do the double or nothing on?
We'll see how the show goes.
Another prop bet. Somewhere Yona's like cringing right now.
Yeah, Yona's like, really?
Yona's cringing somewhere right now. So let's get Sir Neil's take on the future land use map. You predicted this would happen. We have a long road ahead of us. What's your take on the early stage of where we're at with all this?
Well, let me first say that the future land use map is not perfect, but it is progress. There are certain pieces of it that are better defined now through the coordination of the Planning Commission with regard to the sensitive areas, only dealing with the residential portion that are in those sensitive areas, and how that's going to play out of being careful and trying to manage asset appreciation and control gentrification. It's kind of a slippery kind of balance.
Very slippery.
And as a property rights guy, I worry about that. That being said, it is important to recognize the history of zoning is wrapped in the history of this country. And the racist zoning policies are very real. How we unwind that is the challenge before the community. And I believe this particular map goes toward unwinding some of those issues and allows for economic vitality along the corridors, especially increasing heights in specific areas. I think it could have gone further, of course. I'm a big believer that if you're going to be a world-class city, you probably should have more of your city taller rather than 4 stories, but that's me. I think that increasing height significantly increases housing inventory and in turn increases housing affordability.
So exclusionary zoning, that's what we're talking about, right? This really did not happen in the city to the late, I think it's 68 or 69 is when actually zoning came in place. Do I have that close?
That's close,
Yeah.
but there were significant deed restrictions.
Correct.
In various neighborhoods
Correct.
that live on today.
Correct.
State legislators have been working for the last 5 years trying to figure out the right way to get them off the deed, because it is history and it is part of that property's history. It is unfortunate and it is wrong, but it is history.
So, but let's talk about that for a second, because most folks that may not know that. So what Neil is referring to is there's covenants and restrictions. These have been attached to the land, and they were done a long time ago. And some of them live on for a very long time. Some of them even live on forever. And some of them, have very, very blatant racist, a certain class of person is not allowed to live in that neighborhood. And, zoning, I think at some point was trying to help fix that, or maybe not. But the reality of it is the state is going to have to tackle that in order to do that, because it just doesn't go away, right?
Right, and the state, as I say, for 5 years has been working on a solution to that doesn't, because the question becomes one of maintaining the integrity of the deeds. So we can't erase the fact that in 1926, developments were advertised as
White only.
White only.
Yeah.
That's history. It's not proper.
Yeah.
It's certainly not the lens we have today, but that is accurate history.
So Neil, we were talking about this, Jerry and I think it was our Tuesday show. We can get into process a little bit later, but with the new comprehensive plan, what is this really going to increase the density? What is the potential growth in the city for that? Is this really the
That's what everyone's freaking out about. That's the essence of the freak out right there.
Yeah, and that's what I'm trying to dive a little bit into.
Right. Well, one of the things to recognize when you're talking about land use is that in this case, it's permissive. Mm-hmm. People say, well, they've eliminated single-family residential. The reality is they haven't eliminated anything.
Right.
Yeah.
Those houses can still be there. If the owners wish to keep them there in that use, that's fine. It's not a non-conforming use to have a single-family residential. But you could, if you got to the point where you wanted to. If when the Millers have someone off to college, there may be an extra bedroom, and they can rent that extra bedroom with a bath out to someone, and that effectively becomes a granny flat or an affordable unit that's available within the same building. Now, one of the challenges that I think Keith has talked about over the years is the right number for that, because some have said if it's 4, it's cheaper to tear the thing down and build up 4 rather than 3. But in every case I've studied, it has been an evolution, not a revolution. And property owners change the use of their property in sequence or as properties change hands. That being said, I believe that I have a good friend who has 5 children under the age of 10.
Good Lord.
If he moved up next door to me, it would have more impact than having a duplex or triplex next door.
So I need to stop you right there. You need to give that bourbon to him.
Yeah, good Lord. It's terrifying.
I think I'd repurpose that, re-gift that thing. So it's important. You said something that I had a conversation with a couple of folks over the last couple of days since our Tuesday show. Folks will call and text and all this stuff, and the comment always is they are banning single-family detached. And that is not the case.
They're just making they're just making land more opportunistic.
So what they're doing is they're increasing the buy right ability.
Yeah.
Right. Is that correct?
They're increasing the flexibility
There you go.
of the density on a parcel beyond single family.
But there's some, I mean, let's get to the numbers end of it. There's some folks that think this is going to be tens of thousands or I mean, I just don't see that.
It's either that or the gentrification piece, that the land becomes more valuable. And as the land becomes more valuable, folks on fixed income or that are living financially on the margin are going to be pushed out. Because a developer or a well-heeled investor or speculator may be more interested in speculation now because of the opportunistic nature of what's happening.
But nothing happens without what?
Zoning.
A willing property owner.
Oh, yeah, willing property owner.
So if a property owner may become willing because the
Taxes
value,
go up.
right, the value of the property goes up and the taxes go up. That's absolutely a viable thing to have happen. That property owner may find that they can put a partition wall and a separate entrance in, and they can rent half their property for the price of the mortgage, and they can live for basically free. That is a potentiality as well.
Yeah, well.
Every property owner has to make their own decisions based upon what's best for them, their family, and their financial situation.
So are you buying the gentrification argument? Are you not buying that? Or are you buying it?
I'm concerned about it, but I'm more concerned about government controlling the market. So when I hear about sensitive areas and worries about what we're going to allow one place and not another, I have the hairs on the back of my neck stand up, because I've seen what happens when governments fully control markets, and it's not good.
Keith?
I kind of lived that for a half a decade.
Are you buying the gentrification argument, Keith?
It's a real thing. It's, look, it's a reality. And we talked about this on Tuesday, and I love Neil's take on this end of it. That's why this next portion is so important, right? The next portion, to get the zoning nailed down and the policies and the procedures on how to do that. The FLUM, or whatever, the land use plan, is a visionary, aspirational document. This is what we want this to be, but the underpinning force of law and rules is that, and we brought this up on Tuesday, but one of the things that some of the western states are having struggles with this, now you got to interject the building codes into that. So you simply said you put a wall on it, well, hold the time out. Now the building codes come in. Does that wall need to be a 2-hour fire rating? There's a whole layer of other...
How much of the work is actually going through permitting and coding? Or how much of the work is just being done on the fly?
That's a great question. Right now, there's a ton of them that actually are there that just are not legal.
That's what I'm saying.
Right.
And it only becomes an issue when the property owner tries to sell the property.
No.
Is that not right?
That's not right.
When does it become an issue?
When Neil's my next door neighbor and he picks up the phone.
It makes your neighbors the zoning enforcement officers.
That's
because
exactly right.
zoning is enforced on a complaint basis.
That's exactly right.
Okay. So in that scenario, the next door neighbor picks up a phone, calls City Hall, and somebody comes out and takes a look?
I'll give you an example. The home next to me, Lake Monticello, you're allowed to have ADUs. You're allowed to have auxiliary apartments within exterior or interior. Flavanna County allows it. Lake Monticello, and we'll probably get into this HOA discussion
Break it out, just ask the question.
Right. So Lake Monticello says, yes, you can have an apartment in your house, but I can't rent it to Neil. I only can rent it to my mother and father, right? Or I only can have family members in it. And there was a house next to us that didn't do that. We're not snitches, but the next door neighbor.
Snitches get stitches.
Snitches get, well.
I'm just having a vision of a Lake Monticello resident with rolled up cigarettes and a T-shirt. Snitches get stitches.
Neil
Go ahead.
Williamson.
Could have been my father, actually.
Dude, I believe Pop would do that. Pop would be that guy.
No, actually, he wouldn't be that guy.
I don't know. I'm not saying Pop would be the snitch. Pop would just come over with the crowbar and break some kneecaps.
Pop would say, I think you need to move.
Yeah. So Ray Cadell's got a question. We got folks from Nest Realty watching the show.
Hey.
Your buddies at Keller Williams watching the show. How do HOA, so we've talked about this. Let's hear it from Neil.
Sure.
How do HOA regulations fit into this, specifically from Ray Cadell?
Right. Well, as Ray knows, the HOA regulations are a contract with the purchaser of the land. And if and that's a private contract, and they supersede where they are greater than state code or county code. And so if you live in an HOA environment, there are several different kinds, what I would call flavors or intensities of HOAs. The particular HOA that I live in is pretty laid back, whereas there are other HOAs that will measure your grass.
It's true.
And so the HOA has, because you've agreed to it as part of it, the COA POA Act is part of the state code, but you agree to it as a private contract, and you have the opportunity to review all HOA documents before you ratify your property acquisition contract. And repeating once and again, I am not an attorney.
I don't even
No,
play
but
one.
you're right, though.
They don't even play one. So there's an HOA in Charlottesville. If there's a high density overlay over that HOA, and the covenants and restrictions in that particular HOA says this won't happen, guess what? This won't happen.
Correct. And that creates value for some folks that don't want it to happen, and in other places it creates opportunity for folks that do want it to happen. Older neighborhoods tend not to have as strong HOAs. They tend to have neighborhood associations. And mark my words, you will be hearing from all of the neighborhood associations as we move forward with the zoning map. It's important to recognize the same consultant team that worked on the affordable housing plan, the comprehensive plan, is rewriting the zoning ordinance. This was $1 million contract, and they are going to earn every penny.
What do you think, Keith Smith?
Yeah, so again, it's a step process. We've been talking about this forever, and so the next step is the is the zoning ordinances, and that's kind of where the double or nothing bet may come in. And I'm not so sure Neil's going to want to take this, but how long do you think the city's going to take to get through that?
You do not have an election as a trigger point. So I fully anticipate it will be in excess of 18 months, but it will likely be less than 24 months.
So
and I don't remember what the contract was with the consultant.
So then it sounds like we have an over-under, and the over-under would be the city council election of 2023, when councilors McGill, Payne, and Snook are up for re-election.
Yeah.
So if you put the over-under on November, the first week of November, the first Tuesday of November of 2023.
I wouldn't put the over-under in there. I put the over-under in the middle of the summer.
Of that year?
Of that year, yeah.
Okay.
Because it'll be an election. It'll be, if it's not done.
It happened in November of this year of an election year.
I understand that.
After the election.
Yeah, well, by how much?
You only have so much time left in their term.
A few days after the election.
But it wasn't a campaign issue, though. Really? Was it that much of a campaign issue?
I'd say it was a campaign issue. Wouldn't you say it was a campaign issue?
I would say that it has been.
It would have been more of a campaign issue if Walker had stayed in the eleation.
Sean Tubbs and I conducted 2 different candidate interviews, and I would say a third of our questions revolved around the flum.
Okay.
And the implementation, because the question becomes one of, when you have 30 voters come before council and speak in opposition to their neighborhood having this opportunity for density, do you stand with the comp plan or do you stand with the voters?
Well, and that's why you saw Snook and Hill waver a bit
Oh, during that, very much so.
during the last meeting.
Very much so.
Because let's cut to the chase. Snook is Greenbrier, Hill is North Downtown.
Yeah.
And those two were vehemently opposed.
The council represents all of the city.
Yeah,
They are
but-
at-large councilors. Granted, they live in certain
That's what I'm
neighborhoods.
saying. Okay, we
But-
can't ignore that fact. They're human beings.
They are human beings.
Yeah,
They're
and
I
human
guess
beings.
the point I'm trying to make is if I was
And one of them's watching.
If I was a proponent of this and wanted to get this done, I sure as heck would want to get it done before silly season started, before election season started. Personally, that's what I would want.
What are your thoughts on that, Neil?
I would be surprised if it was completed prior to
Yeah.
the 4th of July, 2023.
Yeah.
You would be surprised if it was completed before that.
Yes.
Yeah.
Wow. Smith, you want to put a bet on that? I mean, that's
No,
a long ass bet right there. But still.
yeah, but It's okay. We'll be here for a while.
Yeah.
You
You have a hard stop at 11:30.
Well, that one we have a hard time. But
Okay.
I mean, we're gonna
The show.
unless we just got fired.
No, you didn't get fired.
But
You got renewed, in fact.
I renewed. I just
Yeah.
got renewed. Great. But unfortunately, there's not a bet here because we're on the same page, right?
Yeah.
I think this is a 24-month process, right? And then I think after that 24-month process goes on, then there's going to be this whole length of time, how to figure out how to actually implement it from a bureaucratic, from a regulatory.
Let me give you one other potentiality. The
I
other
love that word.
The other potentiality is that they exceed the scope of the consultant contract.
Oh.
And when that ends, that creates the trigger point for the decision.
Huh.
That would be a choice of either extending the contract,
Which I think would happen.
which I think would happen.
Yeah.
Or keeping to the schedule. Now, this consultant's been pretty good on their schedule in challenging times. So
Charlottesville's track record is contract extension.
Charlottesville's track record is
Contract extension. He's choosing his words carefully right now.
delay rather
Yeah.
than decide.
Belmont Bridge, perfect example of that.
Speaking of which, I needed to come a different way today. That Belmont Bridge is moving along.
We've been dealing with the Belmont Bridge for, it seems like, decades.
Yes.
Very much so. So do you want to settle the over-under at 2 years?
I don't think I know enough to be settling yet. We don't have a new council seated yet. I think we need to see the organizational dynamics of the new council and see how they work together or not. And I think that will have a great impact on where I would come down on the timing of it.
So
I mean, from what I'm looking at as organizational dynamics, he basically means voting blocks.
Yeah, there you
is
go.
what he's basically saying right there. The voting blocks I'm seeing, unless you guys disagree, are Snook, Pinkston, pretty identical. Payne, and Payne's kind of on an island with this council. I'll cut to the chase. And then McGill and Wade kind of in the middle, with Wade leaning more toward the Pinkston Snook side of things.
Well, I remembering that we're a nonpartisan organization,
Sure.
and this is a discussion for how things get done, I firmly believe the new council wants to be different than the current council.
No doubt.
And I think that they will be. I am, by my nature, an optimistic person.
Me too.
And I believe that everyone who runs for public office does so for the betterment of the community. And figuring out how to work together as 5 councilors is critically important to the city.
So I brought up time
That's fair.
for a reason, because love to hear your thoughts on, will Albemarle County actually beat City of Charlottesville to actually getting this done? Because Albemarle County's moving in this direction, right? It's in its middle.
Good question.
It's in the middle of its comprehensive plan.
No, it's not.
Oh, it's not, okay.
Albemarle County is not even at the beginning of their comprehensive plan. They interviewed consultants 2.5 weeks ago to help them with their comprehensive plan. The board endorsed the idea of going forward with a comprehensive plan revision. I think that was last week. That is probably closest to the ceremonial first pitch. We're not even in the first inning
Got it.
of this, and so no, Albemarle County will likely have theirs done in, I think the work plan that I saw, and you can look it up on albemarle.org under the Board of Supervisors minutes, or agendas, because minutes go a year behind, was a 36-month process for the comprehensive plan. They are very much want to make certain that there's citizen engagement. There is a work plan to accomplish that, and it is a long-term project.
So this is why we call this Coffee with the Experts.
Stakeholders.
Stakeholders.
He's a
Excuse
stakeholder.
stakeholders. Sorry,
Stakeholders is a better word.
stakeholders. There you
Yeah,
go.
coffee with the stakeholders.
Stakeholders.
He's the president of the Free Enterprise Forum. So you're
So-
basically saying that 2023 election for Albemarle County is going to be pretty big.
I believe that we will have competitive races. That would be nice.
You think
no,
so?
No problem, no concerns with people who ran this time and ran unopposed. I am a big believer in competitive races. Competitive races make better elected officials. I've seen uncontested elections over my career, and it's not that they're bad, it's just you aren't sharpening the saw. You're not having your ideas tested with the community. And I will say that I have a huge amount of respect for everyone that's in office that was elected this time around.
Yeah.
That being said, I'd like to have a little more time, and I think the coffee with the candidates that you guys did was great, because there really wasn't a reason the candidates had to get out. As long as their significant other voted for them, they won.
Well, this is why we did it. This is why we pulled up this coffee with the candidates, and thank you to Shenandoah Joe for sponsoring this and helping us through it on that end of it. And so that you know, they've all committed to continue to do that. So we're going to be continuing with roundtables with that. But you're 100% right. You know, and it's also really not fair from the elected officials' perspective, because they really don't have, if they won, they don't really have a feeling of what the opposition thinks. What is the other side of the coin? Because not everybody's going to think the same in your jurisdiction. So from their perspective, they don't really have any feedback from the opposite side, because nobody ran against them. Does that make sense?
It does, but I will say that if you were to FOIA the emails,
Right, they're getting a ton of feedback.
They're getting, as a supervisor or planning commissioner, you get a ton of feedback from all sides. And I will tell you, people don't believe it, they read every email.
They do.
They don't always respond to every email. They read every email. At least in my experience, I've been very impressed with the level of detail that our elected officials and how seriously they take their job. There's a saying back when we used to get a packet in an envelope for, say, a planning commission meeting, and you'd have people walk in, and there's a gentleman who teaches planning commissioners. He says, "There's nothing like the sound of a Tyvek envelope being opened for the first time."
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
So sometimes they weren't looking at that stuff in some jurisdictions.
Got some agents watching, some questions coming in. Let me throw this to you guys before we get to the questions. The upzoning, the opportunistic zoning, let's call it, would it have a greater impact on the community if it became, when it comes to fruition in Albemarle or the city of Charlottesville?
So in other words, are there going to be more units produced
That's the question.
in Albemarle versus the city of Charlottesville?
Yeah.
And that is kind of where you and I our chemistry is around. It's kind of where I was leading these series of questions.
Because we're landlocked in Charlottesville.
Right. Well, you're also
Landlocked
in Albemarle County,
Yeah,
less
true.
than 5% of
That's
your
true.
land mass.
That's true.
Unless you change the comprehensive plan, which they're doing. So you could review such an idea.
So there's an opportunity during these next 36 months to have this discussion.
Or not.
Or not.
I think that would be something that would come out. I've been advocating. I actually believe it's going to take a decade. The last time we really significantly drew development area guidelines or lines was 1980. In 1980, I was very young, and some of our folks watching weren't even born.
Some maybe even around this room.
I expected that singer.
Yeah, but so if the and based on that,
I love Neil.
Based on the science at the time, they were looking at it considering
Sure.
Water supply and water quality and retaining rural areas. And there was no 5% ever mentioned. This is where the lines ended up. And we have now less than 5%, thanks to Biscuit Run and a number of other strongly worded environmental concerns, such as stream buffers. Those are things that take up land. So we no longer have the capacity that we once did.
But from a geometric perspective, Albemarle County just has a little bit more space to work with
Yeah, of course.
than Charlottesville.
Yeah. Well, okay, I'll play devil's advocate for the sake of a talk show. Let's just talk political strategy and campaign strategy. In 2023, there's going to be 3 seats up for election. You got the Rivanna District with B, you got Ann with the Whitehall District, and you got Supervisor Price with the Scottsville District. Those 3 districts, Rivanna District, and I would imagine Gerard Smith is going to try again in the Rivanna District. He's a friend of the program, a friend of mine. I've known him since he was in high school. Scottsville District, I'm in the mix there. Whitehall District, Steve Harvey's already in the mix. It's already announced on this show, on this network. Mm-hmm. If anyone in those 3 districts runs with a campaign platform that is pro revision of comp plan and enhanced density in Albemarle County, the likelihood of those 3 people getting into office is not great.
So what if they ran on...
Do you disagree with that statement?
I think it's a much more nuanced statement than that.
Yeah. I agree with
Okay,
that.
let's go down that road.
The concept.
Whitehall, you're going to say is pro-density.
No, what I'm going to say is that the impacts of having Crozet in the development area and being the first one and being very focused, it's a very focused community and small community. The question of where would you grow next to preserve the ability of school teachers to live in our community? Where would you grow?
Crozet, I would say, I don't want to speak for Crozet. I feel like we all here have our pulse on communities in the news cycle. I would say Crozet and Old Trail and many folks that are in Crozet are not hugely in favor right now of density. I would make a legitimate argument that the town of Scottsville is not hugely in favor of density. We know the Glenmore neighborhood and what they did with Breezy Hill is not in favor of density. And I legitimately could make a very strong claim that the Whitehall district and the Rivanna district, Barbersville, I mean, you live in Barbersville for space and green, quality of life, is not in favor of density.
So what you're saying is.
You guys
now
disagree with that, Keith?
Now that I have
I'm
my
gonna let
spot,
Neil answer.
Okay.
now that I have my spot, let's roll up the drawbridge and not let anyone else in. Is that what I'm hearing?
I'm not saying NIMBY.
No, I think what
I'm just doing
Jerry,
political science.
what Jerry's trying to do is overstate the obvious.
Yes.
Right, and for the sake of a talk show.
Thank you.
But the reality of it is, in order for that to happen, the growth areas have to grow, right? And I don't see the political will for the growth areas to grow anytime soon. But what I do see,
Supervisor Price has said on the record, and to me, one-on-one, that before we expand the growth area, we need to fully maximize the 5%.
Let me get it out, because that's where
Yeah.
I was going with
Yeah.
this. So I don't see, and I may be wrong, and those on this table know I tend to communicate on a regular basis with the
You
elected
know them.
officials
Yeah.
on this stuff. I don't see the growth of the growth area. I do see growth within the growth areas.
Within the 5%.
So I want to stop using the word 5% for the sake of this comment at the point. There are growth areas designated within Albemarle County. There are growth areas designated within Fluvanna County. There are growth areas designated within each one of the jurisdictions.
By state law.
By state law. That's thank you, Neil. So that's the next thing that people need to understand. They're required to do this.
Right.
There is a requirement to do it. Now, how much and how much it grows and what it is and all this kind of great stuff is for an internal debate or local debate. By state law, they've got to have it.
And when that state law passed, we advocated for the urban growth boundary to have capacity for the projected growth for the next 20 years. And that didn't get into the law.
So the question
Well, it
goes.
should have gotten into the law.
So my question goes back to where I was out before is, okay, FLUM is approved. Under 2 years, we're going to have new zoning ordinances structured in the city of Charlottesville. We're 36 to 48 to possibly 5 or 6 years out, if Neil's math is right, or my math is right from Neil's comment, for Albemarle County. Where is this growth going to happen, right? And how much and where? Does that make sense?
And what kind of growth will it be?
Yeah.
Right, and let's change the paradigm.
Okay.
I'm trying desperately to look at things differently these days, and try and look with new eyes. So I've seen and heard people talk about redevelopment of sites before. I remember about 15 years ago when Fifth Street was proposed, the Fifth Street station was proposed, Harrison Rue was very upset that there were not apartments. Harrison Rue was the TJPDC executive director at the time. There were not apartments on top of the big box stores. The reality is those big box stores couldn't achieve financing if there were apartments above them. So,
Why is that?
Because commercial loans and residential loans don't play well together. That's the short version of it. There are not the financing mechanisms out there to mix the two together in that type of form. It's because you're in a whole, I don't want to get into the thing, but you're in a whole different world. You're in what they call A&D loans, acquisition development loans, and then you have commercial. It's a super complicated financing mechanism to get it. Is
that's fair. And then when you look at that and you hear people, which I hear every time anything happens on North 29, why don't we just make Fashion Square Mall residential?
Yeah, well, we know why that won't happen.
Yeah, there's a lot of good reasons why that's not going to happen. But there are opportunity sites that could be revisioned if, what do you need to have? A willing property owner.
What are those opportunity sites?
I don't weigh in on projects. I would suggest folks drive up and down 29 and see where you think things could be. There could be more.
So I'm gonna, for the sake of this conversation, I'm gonna brush off a hat that I used to wear prior to the time of great unpleasantness.
He was a developer.
It is always more expensive to renovate than it is to build new.
Sure.
Greenfield development is always cheaper.
By multiple times. And I tell people this when we talk to folks on the real estate end of it. Well, I want to renovate my kitchen and I think it's going to cost $50,000. My comment always is, if you think it's going to cost you 50, it's going to cost you 100. It always costs you double in what it is. So that's what's going to happen. The market is going to go to the greenfields, go to the areas. It's cheaper to tear down and then go up for sure. But renovation of repurposing of existing structures we're a long way from that.
Right, but you're going to see, to Supervisor Price's point, they will point to the tire plant.
Yeah.
They will point to open land in the development area and say that should be developed. Well, why hasn't it been developed yet? There's usually
The numbers didn't work.
a reason, and it's usually the numbers didn't work.
Yeah.
So if you force the development that's going to come into areas where it's expensive to develop, what happens to the price of housing?
It goes up.
And so then what happens to your workforce?
It spreads out.
And so what happens to the environment?
Gets worse.
Gets worse. Well, Fulvanic, some of the rural counties are facing this struggle right now, and the same thing. They do not want to have development within their comprehensive plan, which says it should be within the developable areas. And the problem with that is they'll tend to go by right, which then the elected bodies have zero input on it. But what's even worse than that, the by right subdivisions start growing into the rural area, which was the whole thing everybody doesn't want to do, right? So in Albemarle County is a little bit different because the by right subdivision in a rural area is pretty restrictive. But some of the other jurisdictions, they're not. I mean, you can put, in Fulvanic County, for instance, you can take 100 acres and put 75 homes on it and by right in a cluster development.
Yeah, you can. And the other thing to recognize, that creates what's called leapfrog development.
That's exactly right.
And so, while Albemarle County can sit back and say, we're standing strong on preserving our rural area, but you've created 1,000 units just over the Albemarle County line in Ruckersville.
Yeah.
Kelsey Sherling has a question for Neil. Please ask your guest what he thinks is going to happen to the older properties and who will purchase them in the city of Charlottesville.
Well, Kelsey, thank you for the question. I have seen significant interest from various investors on such properties. I look at Dairy Market, which was a visionary project, and still Chris Henry
Yeah.
did again, we don't speak on projects, but I find that to be a neat project, and preserving a historical reuse of a facility. Adaptive reuse.
That was pretty much close to abandoned.
It was pretty much close to abandoned, and now has new life and has significant activity when I drive by. I think that is a model. Some folks will tear down old buildings. Some old buildings, as Keith said, aren't worth saving.
Yeah.
That being said,
Well, look, historically they might be.
She follows up about neighborhood character.
Yeah.
And I'm cutting to the point here. It's a longer comment. She follows up how that impacts neighborhood character.
sure. And how does it impact neighborhood character? Some of the older buildings contribute to the neighborhood. Every building contributes to neighborhood character. I often think of Mel's down there by the train station. I love Mel's.
Mel's is great.
I think that's a fabulous place, and I love that their sign is grandfathered in and would not be approved by the BAR today. But that contributes to neighborhood character. Now, if Mel's goes out of business, what should that property owner do?
Whatever the property owner wants to do.
And that will impact.
Is that the right answer?
That will impact neighborhood character. Things change. That's one of the things that is really hard for folks. I will say in my personal life, I've seen things change in my neighborhood. And you know what we've done is we've taken a look and said, okay, we may not be here forever because things have changed. Nothing for bad, but just change happens. It's part of progress.
For the sake of a talk show, and everyone who watches this program knows that I love Chris Henry and Stony Point and Dairy Market.
Great job.
We go to Dairy Market. Chris knows this. With our family, with our kid and my wife all the time. But for the sake of the talk show, the Dairy Market and Dairy Central have expedited gentrification in that neighborhood. Undoubtedly.
Has
it really? Or the inclusion of a new vibrant commercial activity has increased the property values for neighbors. Which one is it?
It's both.
Yeah.
It's both.
Yeah.
And to Neil's point, the folks who own the property, the old guard in, what is that? That's 10th and Page, right?
10th and Page.
And 10th and Page do not have to sell, and they could just reap the increased land value and home value that they have. But to their point,
But if they don't want to move, see, that's the struggle, right? That's the struggle.
to a lot of people's points in that neighborhood, they're getting priced out.
They're getting priced out, but we talked.
All those are right.
Correct. So none of this is easy. None of this is simple. Most of this, what we're talking about, is very complicated. This is why there's these long, protracted processes that involve public comment on that stuff. But we talked about this on Tuesday. One of the things I think the city's going to have to look at is start increasing its tax program where it can help retirees or people under a certain income thing to stay in their neighborhood, not forcing them to sell. Dave Norris and I were talking about this down in Norfolk a couple of weeks ago. So this is why this process is going to take a long time, because they're going to have to look at this impact on it. But I want to go back to just straight numbers, right? If you want to build, a duplex in the city of Charlottesville, the last one that was sold is what the Land Trust built, which was $215,000. That was 2 years ago worth about $350,000. Today, that's close to $450,000. So if you wanted to build a duplex at $450,000 a side, your maximum land acquisition, you divide that by 4, is about $112,000. So you need to buy something for about $225,000, $250,000.
Good luck.
Tear it down, which is
Right.
going to cost you $50,000. Redo all the utility work, which is going to cost you another $50,000 to $100,000. The math isn't just going to work. And then you've got to fit it geometrically within a lot, because now what's going to happen, the city's going to say you have to have this kind of a setback, front, rear, left, and back. So there's a ton of work that has to get done. Maybe that's the prop bet. I don't really think this is going to increase more than 1 to 5% of the total population in the city of Charlottesville. I really don't. I don't see much more than a 5,000 over the course of time.
What time span are you talking about? Because the city of Charlottesville for a long time was losing residents, and now it's coming back.
Coming back.
But what time frame?
Why was it losing residents?
Well, I will tell you that if you look at the local government spending index, you can see the drop in residents and the drop in students.
Yeah.
In the K-12, it was remarkable.
Yeah.
And so I would argue that absent zoning reform, zoning changes that allow for increased density, you're starting to bump up against what can be done.
And part of that big change is people my age and up coming back without the children, and you don't have the impact on the school system because they've got the dollars. They sell it in Northern Virginia and they come back.
Right, and then you end up with a community that
homogenous.
That my father described Santa Barbara, California, as about 20 years ago. It's for newlyweds and nearly deads.
Newlyweds and nearly deads. That's fantastic. I'm going to utilize that. Newlyweds and newly deads. Nearly deads. If you're newly dead, you can't. You're dead.
This sounds like a Monty Python skit. There's got to be a Monty Python.
He's very good in this setting. Neil is very good. Keith, what's going on that brain over there? I see it moving.
Yeah, thank you. I just love sitting next to you two gentlemen and bat this out.
This is fun.
And for me to be this quiet for this long, it means I'm just absorbing everything and listening to what's going on there. But I want folks who's watching and listening. This is a good thing, right? This is going in the right direction. I just want to talk. I'm going to eventually get on my affordable housing soapbox, right? Which I always tend to do. But just to think, because I know the math works this way. In order for a real for-sale affordable housing unit, regardless if it's a single-family detached, it's got to be around $200,000 to make it work. How does that work with this?
It doesn't work.
It doesn't work.
It doesn't work.
And the only way it works is with
Subsidy.
Yeah.
and substantial subsidies. And when we have this conversation about the rezoning and changing this within the city, you also have to have this conversation about, okay, how are we going to subsidize this so that this $450,000 duplex actually can be sold for $200,000 and keep our workers and keep our wonderful citizens that help serve us in the community. That's a huge struggle. Don't know how to get there.
Well, I'm a big believer in Keith's stolen silver buckshot.
Robert
Did I really steal that?
You did.
Really?
Robert Liberty.
Yeah. Keith didn't think of it first. But the idea that, one of the things that we've talked about in Albemarle County is, what if Albemarle County, for every affordable unit constructed, paid the tap fees? Now, is that going to make the unit affordable? No. But does it make it more affordable? Yes.
I mean, how much are we talking there?
20 grand.
Yeah.
Well, but I mean, if you layer it with the other things, because every one of these deals that I've seen work has multiple layers of silver buckshot to make it happen.
Wouldn't it be easier to, you guys taught me this, I learned so much from you guys, wouldn't it be easier to just take down that 24% of red tape for new construction and bring it down in the neighborhood of like 15%, 14%?
So that percentage is really, it's a great, and it's aspirational. I get all this stuff. What matters is the subsidy, and what matters is the math. So I'll give a prime example. Spring Hill Village, Land Trust. I'm the chair of it, right? Proffer was set up, yada, yada, yada. They're being sold for $243.
Let them know where that is.
That's it, in Albemarle County, on the corner of, what is it?
South 20.
South of 20. I'm just a chairman. I don't know. I just play a chairman on TV. But the point I'm trying to make is, we're struggling trying to sell them because the delta of the 243 and how much they have to make is so razor thin. We're having a hard.
Explain that.
Yeah. So the sales price is 243 because the proffer says that's what it needs to be. Stanley Martin has built it and done it. But in order to make enough money to qualify that and not exceed the 80% AMI on that end of it, the delta is razor thin. And this is taxes is important. So we were able, we hit a wall, right? I went out and found another $20,000 and was able to put a little bit to a couple of years. $5,000
made a huge impact.
Huge difference. 6 people spit out of the sales funnel over 5,000 that got stuck in it. So subsidies matters. Every one of these little silver pellets, excuse me. Thank you, Mr. Liberty, I apologize. Matters. So don't think $500 or $2,000 or $1,000 doesn't matter. It does. We had a family kick out over $5. Was making $5 more than what they had to. $5, guys.
That seems ridiculous.
$5. The price of this freaking cup of coffee kicked a family of 3 out of buying a home.
Well, before we get too far afield, I do want to bring up another issue with housing affordability, which is time to get things done.
Oh, yeah.
Last Friday morning, I received an email that indicated that there were over 300 residential and commercial permits sitting in Albemarle County's plan review queue. So these were permits that were accepted, but not yet entered. So they're not even being looked at yet. 300.
So I made an application, gave a set of blueprints, filled out the application, paid my fee.
Paid your fee.
Paid my fee, and how long am I waiting now?
In Albemarle County, it is taking 4 months to get a building permit. Keith, how long should a building permit take?
2 weeks.
2 weeks? I know localities that are turning around in 2 days.
Yeah.
It is,
But you're missing some time there, by the way. What part of that equation are you missing? The back end. CO takes about a month.
CO, that's a different part.
Well, no, that's important.
It's critically important.
Because I can't move you in until I get to
Right,
CO.
but one of the beauties, and I want to compliment Community Development of Albemarle County has been working with the Blue Ridge Home Builders Association and with me, trying to solve this problem, and they've been very transparent that it's a problem. And it's a huge problem. But one thing that they had come forward, which was a really commonsensical change, it used to be you couldn't turn in your building permit until you had, if you were working with a well and septic, health department approval.
Yeah.
And that takes a couple of weeks usually.
A little more than that sometimes.
Sometimes 4 weeks, but now they're letting it go forward concurrently so that you file both and you have to show that you filed it.
But that hasn't shortened that 4 months down.
That has not shortened that 4 months. In fact, it's gotten,
Worse.
it was 3 months about 2 months ago. It's now 4 months.
Yeah.
And I will say that it's a challenging thing for applicants to be able to speak about, because if you speak up, you may get slapped down by a reviewer. And that's a real problem. So they've come to me and to the Blue Ridge Home Builders and others and said, hey, you need to tell people that this is going on, because you have folks that literally have contracts to purchase, and they are not moving forward on the building permits because they're backlogged.
So if you have an opportunity on December 3rd, I've got Virginia Home Builders Association coming in, the local Home Builders Association come in to talk this very topic on December 3rd on, how's the state, because this is not just exclusive to Albemarle County, how the state is looking at this, right? I mean, there's other jurisdictions that have the same struggle on that end of it, but the impact, we talked about this before, 24% of new construction is regulatory. This is part of that cost that's backed into it, because if I'm the developer or the builder, I borrowed the money, I'm paying interest on it.
Let's take the developer and builder out of it. Let's talk about
The homeowner,
let's talk about Jerry.
the end user.
Jerry wants his mother-in-law to live with him, and he's going to need to expand and have a bedroom in the basement and a bathroom.
I actually wouldn't mind if my mother.
And she'd be a great help. But the problem is that it's going to take 4 months to get a building permit to do that.
Or what's going to
By
happen?
the time that happens, you may lose your contractor.
And what's going to happen? If that's going to happen, what's going to happen with that apartment renovation? It's just going to get done
Yeah.
without a permit.
Without approval.
without a permit. Yeah.
Probably not in a strong HOA neighborhood, but
Yeah. Sure. Because we'd rat them out, right?
Gwendolyn, we'll get you your comment here. Let's get to Grayson's first. Thank you, Gwendolyn, for watching. Grayson says, to Keith's point, the neighborhoods that are the most vulnerable are the ones that are the lowest price points. Watch what happens to the Prospect neighborhood. For example, I have a rental property in Prospect, and everyone in this neighborhood should be very concerned what's going to happen to this neighborhood as more people come in and invest their money and build denser housing to reap larger margins.
and neighborhoods change.
Yeah.
It's in a city, neighborhoods change. At one time, all the rich people lived at the end of the streetcar, because that was where the furthest they could go and still get into their offices. And then the automobile was invented, and that brought us the suburbs. And what we found was white flight from the cities, frankly.
That's right.
And so historically, there is an ebb and flow between urbanism. There really is if a city is surviving, it is changing. And I like to say that we're growing, whether it's density or just improving. But it is a living organism, and it needs to be recognized as such.
Gwendolyn, go ahead, Keith.
I wanted to go back to the permanent, but let's answer Gwen.
She says, how does this apply or influence surrounding counties like Greene? And she's very interested in Greene because she has a vision of building the, is it the tiny homes for affordable housing?
Yeah.
Tiny homes for affordable housing.
For veterans in particular.
For veterans.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Which I get chills thinking about.
Yeah, I think it's a great idea.
Look, you'll see it, right? The rubber band just gets bigger. The jurisdictions that are a little bit easier to work with, that's where the projects are going to go.
Or not.
Or not. And well, why wouldn't it?
Well, because on Tuesday night, because I know you were watching, Greene County, or it's Wednesday night, Greene County Planning Commission.
I'm sorry.
Greene County's Planning Commission voted 5-0 opposing a new development. And the question, it's a rezoning from what was designated as a senior residential to a standard residential, roughly the same density.
But the point is, that's just going to keep on growing. So if that doesn't work, then it's going to go to the next one. It's going to go to the next one. And eventually, that rubber band is just going to become huge. And then how are people going to get back and forth and traffic and all that fun stuff?
All of those things are interrelated, but I would suggest that what's been approved in Greene County to date is significant.
I would agree with that.
Number of units. Especially in the Ruckersville corridor from the intersection of 2933 south to just below the Sheets intersection at Matthews Mill Road. There are at least, I believe it's 1,000 units that have been approved in those areas. Some are senior residential apartments. There's an additional neighborhood that's going to be kind of a center if it comes to pass. All of these things have to pencil out, and the economy needs to keep moving. And quite frankly, for a long time, the tagline for the outlying counties, they put on their letterhead, not Albemarle.
It did not do that.
I thought it was Charlottesville, not Charlottesville. So I want to go back to permits, right? And this is a real estate show, right? And the impact on the end user. Well done there, Mr. Williamson.
I like how he deadpans it. That's the best part of it. That's how it's delivered. Go ahead.
Look at it.
I think he's hilarious. He's hilarious.
I'm trying to get serious here.
Okay,
you guys are having
we
fun.
do have a question for Neil about the 490 unit proposed development along Old Ivy Road, and this is coming from multiple people. But go ahead, Keith. Go ahead.
Well, I'll let him tackle that in a minute, but I just wanted to put some real-world applications to this delay in building permits and the delay of COs, right? And it makes a difference, right? So if Mr. Miller is building a home and he can't get a CO, he potentially, and I have this happening to us, his lock expires, his mortgage lock expires, his rate goes up. It's actually costing.
Cost of goods go up. Look what happened to lumber.
Well,
during COVID.
The unit's built, and I'm just trying to close it, right?
Okay.
And I can't close it on Monday because we don't have a CO, and it's not going to take 2, 3, or 4 weeks out. And literally, a real world had this happening to me this morning that we're trying to figure out through Scott Morris how we can extend the rate lock, because his rate was locked 90 days prior to the closing date at 3%. Now it's over 3%, and this 0.25 or 0.33 or whatever it is on a monthly payment makes a huge difference. So this impacts real world pocketbooks for folks.
It does.
Just want folks to understand this is more than affecting builders and developers. This impacts the people that are trying to move into the homes. Oh, by the way, you got multiple trucks. Moving trucks are moving. I'm sorry, we can't close because we're waiting on a building permit.
Lease backs.
It becomes this huge, complicated process.
So 2 comments, 2 different Facebook pages here. So I'll give some background here before I read the comments. Allison Rabel, she does a hell of a job, bang-up job, great reporter, covers Albemarle County. There was a story a few days ago in the Daily Progress that has gotten a lot of traction, and the story is about a proposed 490-unit development along Old Ivy Road, close to the railroad bridge underpass. Mm-hmm. So that is right by St. Anne's Belfield. And St. Anne's Belfield, we'll cut to the chase, is a very influential private school that has a number of big-time donors, and we'll call them well-networked stakeholders that support the school. And this 490-unit development is got some folks up at arms.
So let's talk about it for a second. It's rental only. This is not, at least what I've read and what I've depth into it. So it's important for everybody, before Neil answers this question, to everybody understand, this is not a for sale development. This is a rental unit project.
It's okay. I'm gonna call up the article. So Greystar, Allison Rabel, you did a great job with this. Greystar is the developer. They are a rental housing development and property management company headquartered in Charleston, South Carolina. They are the contract purchaser of the properties, and they want to build a maximum of 525 homes. It has submitted a proposal for 490 homes called Old Ivy Residences, which includes 65 single-family detached, 47 townhouses, 54 duplexes, and 324 apartments, all rentals, to Keith Smith's point.
I just read the article. It was an excellent article.
It was an excellent article. This is almost like, frankly, has this been done to this magnitude in this area of Albemarle?
And by the way, look for that to turn into student housing, by the way.
They're in that game.
Yeah, I know these players.
Yeah.
This is the game plan.
Well,
Yeah.
But first off, let's back up to why this article happened today, or yesterday, or whenever it was. There was a public meeting mandated by county code, a public community meeting, I believe it was Monday night, where the applicant presented to the community via Zoom meeting, thank you, COVID, expressing what they wanted to do. Prior to going to any public hearing, they heard impact from the community, heard about concerns, and generally speaking, back when, prior to the great unpleasantness, when Keith was wearing his other developer hat, the concerns are always focused in a certain 3 or 4 areas. It's students. It's the idea of that you're going to generate new K-12 students. You're going to generate traffic impacts and economic impacts.
Sure.
Those are the 3 you generally hear.
Usually also other infrastructure, like water and sewer and stuff.
Other
like that.
infrastructure, but in this case, this is within the
Yeah,
jurisdictional area.
Sure.
And based on I was probably the only public at the Albemarle County Service Authority meeting yesterday.
Thank you for doing that.
The capacity is there for this.
Yeah.
And it is a change. We're talking about changes. This is within the development area. It's hard to argue that it's not well situated for services and service delivery.
That's fair.
You could say Old Ivy Road is a road that's in need of enhancement.
No doubt.
I believe the applicant spoke to what enhancements they can do on their property to help, but they don't own the other properties. They can't really do off-site improvements, nor would it naturally fit or could be mandated. The concerns are real, and that's what these community meetings help identify. That's what the goal of them is to identify those things and mitigate those impacts that the development can, and understand that some of these impacts are going to happen based upon the comprehensive plan.
So what's the by
designation.
right use for that parcel?
The by right use, I think it's in there, was like 130 units, I think, something like that.
So to be clear, they can do 130 units, pretty much not ask permission. They just have to follow the site plan process to go through that, or what they're proposing.
Right, and don't quote me on that, which I've just
Yeah.
said in the media, but I mean, I'm sure Allison has the number in the
Yeah,
story.
I'm trying to find that.
Yeah.
But I do believe that there is a
That's the
by
number I
right
remember.
ability.
That's the number I remember.
It's about that number.
Yeah.
And
It's important to talk about that
It's
because-
important to talk about it, but it's also important to talk about, look at this project, and we don't speak in favor or against projects. What have we talked about for years? About a variety of housing product. What does this project bring forward?
Variety of projects.
A variety of project
In the
types.
rental space, which that's the reason why I pointed that out, that's important, because rentals are going up. Last year was 8.5% nationwide year over
And
year.
some landlords actually bake increases in rent into their contracts. That's why. So I've heard.
Sure.
That's true. That's true. Neil Williamson keeping me on my toes here.
They just stir it, right? They stir it in. Is that how
Folks,
that works?
there's people that are watching who have not read the article.
Sure.
And now are surprised about hearing this because they're posting. Charlottesville, Greystar operates apartments targeted to UVA students,
Yep.
which include Jefferson Commons,
Yep.
Wortland Square, the Grand Mark on the corner, and Cavalier Crossing. Now,
I can tell you the business plan on this is to target students.
Okay. Well, any more insight to offer here?
No, I just know this property. I know who's been looking at it for decades, and that is really the thinking behind that. That's kind of what I think they're going to want to do. Is
Spencer says on the feed, it's obvious neither of you guys have waited in traffic when school lets out at St. Anne's Belfield.
That's a fair comment.
Very
And it's
much
fair
so.
when you talk about Western Albemarle, too.
Yeah, 250, Western Albemarle, when Western and Henley let out at the same time. That's also fairly congested, and by fairly I mean significantly. Keith, you want to add to that?
No, but this is why what we talk about here is important. Where I don't, obviously Neil's not in favor of the project one way or the other. Neither are any one of us at this table. We're just providing information. It's out there, folks. There's a public process. Neil is 1,000%. All the jurisdictions, by the way, have this what they call neighborhood meetings, right? And so everybody knows what happens is if you're going to develop a piece of property, there's a required neighborhood meeting, and there's letters that are sent some multiple parcels deep, so the adjoining property owners can sit down with whoever the applicant is and have this conversation. Every single jurisdiction, am I wrong?
No, you're correct.
Every single jurisdiction has that. That's a requirement. That's step number one. The problem is, who knows about it, right? And that's why we're talking about it here. This is why.
Let me be clear. The adjacent property owner notification is every locality. Not every locality mandates a community meeting. Many developers do this on their own.
Of course.
Because it's good business to identify the issues that are going to come up in the public process. Those things earlier, you can adjust and perhaps mitigate those impacts.
Spencer adds, there's no way Ivy Road can handle this kind of traffic. I think we're all in agreement, Spencer, that Ivy Road needs to be enhanced.
The question becomes who pays for it,
Yeah,
right? And how does this work?
yeah, exactly. So we're in agreement that it needs to be enhanced. What are your thoughts on the rental, the addition of rental rooftops and how that could impact the for sale housing market?
It's important to note, all this chatter that we have about affordable housing,
Any housing is good housing.
the rental market is a critical part of providing housing.
That's exactly right.
It is critical that that's recognized. There are times when I hear people say, well, if you're in rental housing, you're not doing the right thing. No, there are times in your life that you may want to be in rental housing. Your whole life, you might want to be in rental housing.
I'm the second generation to ever own a house in my family. My mother and father were first generation. I was second generation. Every generation prior to that rented.
Right, and those folks that rent with good housing providers will generally not have some of the surprises of, oh, I need a new roof. Well, if the housing provider is an apartment complex, a portion of that rent is going to save for that roof because they've calculated the lifetime expectancy of the roof and they've done the work. But there are always outliers. But the reality is the rental housing market must be considered a part of the housing market.
Well, well, wait for this word. It's a plethora of opportunity.
Plethora.
Well, I'm coming up on a hard stop.
I know you are.
I needed to throw a big word out there so everybody thought I understood. But diversity. We talk about diversity, right? Inclusion, all this stuff. Diversity in housing product, housing type, rentals, ownership. This is super important. It's for a healthy market. It's for healthy everything is to have diversity in it. But this stuff is not easy stuff, guys, right? And this is what I love about the show. This is a pretty heavy topic.
This is a very heavy topic.
And we're trying to make it a little bit more approachable and understand. At least that's the goal anyway.
Brittany has this comment. Ask Keith how this could impact homes that are coming on the market for sale. She's alluding to Ivy Road and adding potentially 490 rental units right by St. Anne's Belfield Academy.
This is probably not going to be a very popular answer. I'm going back to my pool thing. The buyer pool is so deep that it's not going to impact anything. I don't really, historically, they're talking about what the surrounding properties value might impact on it.
Yes.
Yeah, I don't think it will. I don't think it will at all. That's
You
just
don't
my
think that?
Nah.
Wow.
No, I don't think.
Genuinely, you say that?
Yeah, well,
Under current market conditions.
under current market conditions, thank you very much.
Okay.
Under current market conditions. If that pool changes,
Because he's saying demand, Brittany, demand is so high. that this isn't going to impact?
Yeah, it's not going to
You
impact.
genuinely mean that?
Oh, yeah, sure. Yeah, I do. Yeah.
It's also, things are relative. I'm fascinated by folks who come here from Northern Virginia.
Yeah, it's a piece of cake.
Or New York or New Jersey.
Excuse me?
And they say, the traffic here is fabulous.
Yeah.
And then you have people coming from Nelson, and they say, what do you mean we have a traffic light?
Well, let's.
Well, we had a guest on the Monday Market Monitor, Christy,
Yeah,
who said that.
that's exactly right. But let me try to answer that question a little bit
And
differently.
was shocked with the traffic. Was
So
a
what's
small town girl.
So what's the largest subdivision, other than Lake Monticello, that's been built in volume in our region?
Forest
Largest.
Lakes.
Forest Lakes.
Yeah, Forest Lakes.
What's the second largest?
Well, number 1 is Lake Monticello, 2 is Forest Lakes, 3 is probably Old Trail.
Okay, so Forest Lakes and Old Trail. They weren't there, now they're built. Has the values surrounding Forest Lakes been impacted since Forest Lakes been there? The answer is no.
No, but okay, for the sake of a talk show, the Forest Lakes homes that were built were homes to be purchased and not homes rented. So to Brittany's point, she's saying,
Okay, so she's thinking the rental units
Yes,
will decrease.
that's what she said.
Yeah,
But
I just want to identify her point.
I misunderstood the question.
But
Yeah.
flip that over to, there were
Excuse me, I misunderstood the question. So
there were
that's a little
a
different.
significant portion, I can't remember the name of the project, right behind Barracks Road, new apartments went up.
Was it Barracks West?
It was newer than that.
Okay.
But it was in the last 3 to 5 years.
What about the one right on River Road?
Or the one right on River Road. Either of those have significant rental units. How did that impact the neighbor pricing?
It didn't. It didn't.
But Neil's comment was spot on their current market conditions. If this was 2008, 2009, 2010, you bet your butt it would have impacted the market a little bit. And again, I apologize. I thought we were.
So how does your answer change then?
Well, I don't think it ultimately changes that much, but I don't think anybody really knows what that's going to impact the market on the end of it. My comment I was trying to get is Old Trail grew in volume, Forest Lakes grew in volume. Old Trail has rental units in it.
And the thing to note is that those projects didn't move significantly forward during the time of great unpleasantness.
They did not.
That's
So
true.
the market has, the Adam Smith invisible hand is working, and it has an ebb and flow to it that goes with the economy. That being said, I do want to, before I know we have a hard break,
Yeah, and he just gave me the look.
all sincerity, gentlemen, I can get up and walk out, and you guys can continue the
No,
conversation.
we're good.
Okay.
We're
no,
good.
we're good. But
We're
but
mindful of your time.
I will say that I encourage folks who are interested in this type of topic to visit freeenterpriseforum.org and check out our blog post. Just type in development into the search bar. We have thousands of blog posts over the last 15 years. We've been working in this specter, and we are unabashedly pro-business. Don't get me wrong. But we talk about the balancing. And while you're there, you have the opportunity to read one of our new reports, 5 ACEs, which talks about challenges in the ACE program in Albemarle. That's under the reports tab. And you have the opportunity to donate. You can give online, and you can help support this work, because quite frankly, without that level of donor support, this work doesn't happen. I can't be at the Albemarle County Service Authority meeting without donors that support the work of the Free Enterprise Forum.
So I'm going to play off of that a little bit. Even if you don't 100% agree with Neil is saying, you should donate anyway, because he's providing information for you to help make a decision.
He's papering the record.
He's papering the record.
So this is we'll close on this, and maybe this isn't the best way to close, but it's a great comment. This is from Vanessa Parkhill. Devil's advocate here: if the owner of a rental property is an advocate of affordable housing and their mortgage and expenses are covered by a given rent amount, why do they continue to raise rents to keep up with market rates? He or she has the power to set that rent as they see fit. Sounds like it's okay to change someone else's neighborhood while continuing to allow the market to set the tone for their investment property. I'm all for market-driven approach, but just seems kind of hypocritical.
So what's the best way to hedge against inflation?
Yeah, own a home.
Own a home for 30 years, 30-year mortgage.
Something's on Neil's brain right there on that comment.
Well, I think that the point is well taken. I will say that it depends upon the housing product and the maintenance that's required of that housing product, most people who own homes or own investment properties will tell you that it's not just mortgage and interest that goes into the balance sheet for that property.
Well, you
Exactly.
mentioned it before. You've got to put your ROI away for your roof and your
Subs,
HVAC.
subcontractors, appliances.
HVAC, yeah, sure.
A lot of times these are loan mechanisms that adjust to market interest rates.
Well, that's a very important thing because typically it's not
A 30-year fixed.
It's usually like a 5-year balloon.
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah, got it.
It's rates that adjust to
Yeah.
market, which is different than home ownership. We got to go. He's
I got to
a hard
go because
stop. I
Mrs.
know.
Smith is calling me.
You got a hard
back.
stop.
But before-
You're awesome. You're awesome. Neil Williamson is awesome. President, Free Enterprise Forum.
Thank you, Neil.
Yeah, dude, you're awesome.
I gladly lost
Thank
it.
you.
Thank you.
Yeah, this is, for those that are asking, we'll archive the entire show on ilovecville.com. Support the Free Enterprise Forum. This dude just kills it, Neil Williamson. Judah, thank you for keeping us in check. Why don't we close here? Nancy Gill, former mayor of Scottsville at 12:30, guys. This is Real Talk on a Friday, and this one's powered by Sigora Solar and Shenandoah Joe's. Dave Fafara, thank you.
So
Thank you.
watch on Tuesday because I got a little surprise for Jerry on an outfit to wear.
Oh, that's
So-
terrifying. I don't even know what we're doing. Watch on Tuesday. Take care, guys. Neil, you were awesome.
You know, for me to